Hey everybody, what's going on? We came on a little bit early so we can iron out some technical things, maybe.
Hopefully.
Perhaps. We're hoping we can.
And say hi to everybody.
We are. And Jessica's here.
Hi.
Our friend Mary Washington's sitting over here, and she's going to be, just so you know, the lens is over here, the little green dot.
Okay.
And Mary's going to be looking at comments and feeding us all that stuff. So here you go, Mary. That should work for you. And I'm trying to figure this out myself. So it's been a long time since we've been online. Let us know what the audio looks like, or the audio looks like. So much for me multitasking. That's what I'm saying. And
maybe what the
video looks like. Yeah, we've already had some comments. No, that's not on
That's
that one.
That's the other one.
Why is
You
that
gotta
not
refresh it.
showing up? No.
Yep.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't
cool.
have your sweatshirt on.
Cool. The audio's going to freak out here for a second, so hang on.
Yeah.
Okay. There we go. So you seeing some comments?
Yep.
There's Leroy Strong he's on YouTube. Hey, Leroy.
Hi, baby.
We miss you.
Mwah. You
I hear
should be
you're
here with
coming
us.
back in May for my big 7-0 birthday party.
It's a party.
There's a party going on. It's going to be early, and on May 3rd. My birthday's on May 9th, but we'll be at the Rock of KC. You got the whole band, 11 pieces, 10 or 11, somewhere around in there. And we'll be doing the deal, blowing the thing up, calling it what it is. So anyway, Jessica's here today. It's a very special day at our house because on March 14th, 2011, we met.
For the very first
For
time.
the very first time. And it's been a story of epic proportions. How about that?
How about that?
That's a good descriptor, isn't it?
It is epic.
Epic proportions.
Yeah. Yep.
So anyway, I've got too much going on here, too much tech happening. So I'm trying to move something off of one monitor onto another. Hey, Shelly, what's happening? Jim Bender, what's going on? Lynette, she's a rock star in Flagstaff.
Cool.
She just took care of us while we were out there on the reservation.
Nice.
And she's just such a blessing to be out there with everybody, doing the thing.
I love it.
Doing the deal.
Yeah.
So I think this might be a little bit better for us so we can see the feed coming in from, that's not it. That's not the right one.
That's Facebook.
That's Facebook. So let me see if I can go to the Restream window. There we go. And let me see if I can get that up there a little better.
Oh, there we go. Leroy Strong says he likes Flagstaff. He graduated high school in Flagstaff.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he did. Flag High.
So if we're looking up at the monitor. I think it was better down here, wasn't it? But you couldn't see it, could you?
Because the camera's in the way.
All right.
Thanks,
so
Dad.
Anyway, we appreciate everybody being here tonight and logging in. And so we got a story to share. It's our story. Jerry Q. Hutchinson, Angel 95, he aired the audio from one of our videos yesterday in its entirety on the radio station out there. Jerry, we really appreciate that. Thank you for helping us. And then he sent it on to the National Center for Fathering, and so we're excited about that. And Jerry, you can let me know if there's anything I need to do or one of our team needs to do to follow up with that. We just appreciate you, what you did for us.
That's a big deal.
It is a big deal. But we have a story to tell, so.
Oh.
Voila.
Okay. So if you've been following along on our Facebook post for the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about getting forgiveness, or just forgiveness in general, really. And that's the start of the story, is being able to get the forgiveness that we need to be able to give the forgiveness, right? And so at this point, we haven't talked on the phone or in person. We've shared texts and emails, and they're on the East Coast. And it's, as of the last post this morning, we're getting ready to go meet for dinner. Is that where we are in the story, or are we going to start from the beginning?
So we've got folks online from Brazil.
Cool.
We have...
I know, I'm such a dork. It's okay.
We have folks, Mary Platero's on here from Northern Arizona. We met her at, and she shared this with Northern Arizona Women's Fellowship.
Cool.
So, a bunch of folks.
Hey, Dave Wilcox, man, I see you.
Yeah, Dave we just became friends. We'll have to connect sometime. And so anyway, I wanted to stop you. We've got people from Canada. John Blatz from Manitoba, Canada.
We like Canada.
We do. Sorry, I couldn't help it. What were those? The McKenzie brothers? Is that what it was?
Take off, eh?
Sorry about that, John. We just lost it there for a second. So
it's okay. Welcome to real life with us. This is really what it's like. We are goofballs. As Jarrett Sykes said, this is the Goober podcast. Goobers.
So, anyway, so if you have questions, hey, Dennis Nelson, if you have questions, be sure to post them. Mary's over here monitoring those. And we have a giveaway to do tonight. Mary's going to pick that out. We got all kinds of stuff. Oh, the yellow ribbon fell out. We got music, signed copy of the book.
Our favorite candy bar.
Some Zero candy bars in here. Sherry went out, picked out some plaques. There's a pin. There's some other stuff in there. And a nice green box that I ordered. So
good job, Dad.
We'll give that away tonight
nice
and mail
box.
it to you. So it's a nice box. So anyway, back to the story. So go ahead, honey.
Okay, so
you talk about your, like growing up and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I'm from Liberty, Missouri.
Me too.
It was a small town when I was born. I lived with my mom, my grandparents, and my 3 siblings. And I just always knew that I was different than other little girls. So I always believed I was different, but I didn't understand why. Until later, I realized that I was missing a key figure in my life. And so when there was daddy things happening, I was odd. I didn't have a daddy showing up for dance recitals or for graduation or whatever. And that left a hole in my heart, or a wound in my heart, and caused me to live my life through the filter of being without. So lack and scarcity is where I started. And as I went through into teenager and eventually into womanhood, that lack and scarcity colored every relationship I had. So that's where we start. That's where I started. Let me see. I think it's important for you to know that about the time I was 13, my older brother and I had moved back to Liberty. We'd been in Arizona, southern Arizona, for a while. And we we come back and reconnected with some friends. And we're at a party. I'm 13. I'm doing a bunch of stuff that no 13-year-old should probably be doing. And she says, well, what would you do if you met your dad? And I said, I'd probably punch him in the face. Probably. I'd probably punch him in the face and walk off. And I'm sure I said it in a much more colorful way at that point. And that was it as far as I was concerned. All the daddy things were being locked up in a little box in my heart that I was not going to address or talk about or examine in any way. I wasn't interested in doing it because it was too painful. So fast forward through my life, my sister Jennifer was in a church service in St. Louis, Missouri.
You're going really fast.
Am
You're
I?
like already to 2009 now.
Well, I mean,
So
so you talk.
So my deal, my backstory is that I grew up in Liberty, Missouri, and I grew up in a home that was very loving and completely undisciplined. I was totally undisciplined. So that was a philosophy, a pop psychology philosophy that was going around in the late 50s, early 60s, and my parents didn't discipline me. And so I made huge decisions that were completely based on my own selfishness in every way, shape, or form. And so I was 17 years old. I was partying with a girl, and one night she came to me and said, "I'm pregnant." And I said, that was interrupting my selfish life, and I hate that decision, but I made that decision to ignore it. And so I did. And I still had this longing. In fact, when we're doing these talks in churches now, like TED Talk kind of sermon kind of things, we've changed the name of them to Something Was Always Missing. And something in our lives was always missing, and we didn't know what it was, but we just knew that there was something that there was there was a crossroads coming.
Yeah.
How's that?
Yep.
And it wasn't we was selling our souls to the devil.
No.
But we knew there was a crossroads coming in our lives and in our hearts. And so in the mid-'80s, Sherry and I had, Sherry, if she was here, she would say, yeah, he was crazy over there and I was crazy over here. And then we brought our crazy together. And if you know our story, we have a book about it called Granny Paid for Our Divorce, which is a actual event that happened. My sister Patsy's on here somewhere. And so anyway, so Sherry and I met, she got pregnant. We got married. Jason was born. We were married for 3 years and divorced. But right after that, about a year after our divorce, we remarried and came to faith in Jesus. And our lives were radically transformed. And if Patsy's on here, she can she can comment about how radical that was, because it was one of the, it's like the song Amazing Grace. I once was lost, was now found, was blind, but now I see. And that's the way it was with us. We just, we went from one extreme to the other. We then got very hyper-religious, legalistic, and mean. That's what the song I wrote called Bad Religion is all about. There's John Lee in Texas. John, love you, man.
And Virginia Wills.
Yeah, I saw Virginia in
North Carolina.
Yep, and TJ Clay in California.
And TJ Clay, love you, man.
And we're only looking at one feed here, so I'm sorry, but...
So can you talk about when, because that was also at the same time frame, that hyper-religious, legalistic time frame that you mentioned was when you saw me for the first time.
Well, I was getting there, bossy.
Yes. I'm not bossy, I'm motivational.
So in the mid-'80s, sorry, I'm moving something back over here to my other screen so I can see it. So there we go. So I can see all the screens that are going on.
There's a lot happening.
My phone. So in the mid-'80s, so Sherry and I came to faith in 76, and in the mid-'80s, I was at a restaurant in our hometown, Liberty, Missouri, and I was having breakfast, getting ready to go to work, and I saw this girl that I had partied with, her grandfather, her dad,
Yep.
Jessica's grandfather came walking in the room, and you couldn't like not recognize him
Oh my
because he
gosh,
was
yeah.
big, huge.
So
Big,
6'6" and one of the few brown people because he was a big Indian.
yeah. And so I saw him, and I saw this little teenage girl across the room. And oddly enough, Sherry had asked us when we were still crazy before we came to faith in Jesus, she had asked me this question one night. She said, "Now, you're not going to have some kids showing up somewhere, are you?" And I said, "Well, maybe." And I told her about Jessica. And I said, "I don't know." And so I saw her that day in that restaurant, across the restaurant, and I immediately said, "This is my daughter." And so I went and for those of you that are millenniums, I went and found a cell phone, or found a payphone.
There was those cell
There
phones.
was sorry, I was distracted. I got too much stuff going on. And so I found a payphone. For those of you who don't know, that was like you had to put a coin in the phone and then you could dial it. So I found a payphone and called Sherry. And I don't even know how I got a hold of her, but I got a hold of her and said, "Hey, I saw this little girl in the restaurant and she's my daughter." And so we started to vigorously ask the Lord, what should we do about that? And his answer was, you should wait. And so that's what we did.
So that's the same time frame that I was at the party that I referenced earlier, where I was saying, what would you do if you met your dad? And the answer is I would blow it up. At the time, my broken heart was beginning to manifest in some really destructive behaviors. And, God's timing, I believe that God protected us in that. Anyway, I have a lot to say about that.
And so we then continued to wait. And every time she came across my mind, I would pray for that girl. And
yeah. And so as I became an adult, at least an adult by age, I was continuing to make some destructive decisions, and I found myself in a not so awesome situation and realized or felt like I felt compelled to walk into an Air Force recruiter's office and sign up and join the military. And what I didn't know then is that would lead to a series of interactions where I would meet one of my lifelong best friends, Jen Legacy, where, like Dad described, we were crazy here, and then we became friends and we were crazy together. And our time in the Air Force started with that. It didn't end with that, but and I continued to live out of this place of brokenness and this place of lack and scarcity. So in 2007, nope, that's not right. In 2008, our paths crossed again, except this time I'm in a place where I am seeking, and I've been to a couple of different churches. One of my sons says, "Hey, I want to go to this youth group," and I'm got some church hurt, and I'm like, "You're not going anywhere until I check this church out." And I walk into Christmas Eve service, and this redhead walks in front of me, and it's my friend Jen Legacy. And at that moment, my discipleship journey began. And so I began seriously following the Lord, and my life began to become incredibly uncomfortable because nothing that was in my life at that time was really kind of in line with what God wants for us. So fast forward to 2009, Father's Day.
Hang on. So
what did I miss?
Well, nothing. You didn't miss
okay.
anything. I just wanted to interject something. So for everyone that's listening, we're telling these details of the story because it reveals God's work in putting every little detail together and in following every little part of our lives, and knowing how to orchestrate those things that are way beyond our control. It's like when all this started happening, a little later in the story, I began to understand why, for you Bible people, why Matthew chapter 1 was in there. And it was no longer, and that's the genealogy of Jesus. It's no longer boring because God is interested in every one of us to the point where he's watching our story down through the years and through the decades to say, hey, I'm interested in this, and is there a way that I can make these things come up, bring people to a place where if they're willing, there's an opportunity for things to be different.
Yeah, that's good.
So I just wanted to kind of say that's why we tell these details, because it was, it was wonderful. It was amazing for me to watch and to sit back and go, I can't understand how God's hand could be so detailed and so good and so kind and so patient and all of those characteristics that he has to wait on us to get to a place where he's like, okay, now this is the time.
This is the moment.
So 2009, it's Father's Day, and Sherry and I and Jason and the band, we're in St. Louis, and we're doing a thing at St. Louis Family Church in Chesterfield, Missouri. It's a big church. There are thousands of people there. But there was one girl in the audience, and we didn't know her, and she didn't know us, and it happened to be Jessica's little sister.
Yeah, so my sister Jennifer was in this church service, and by this time, I am all in for Jesus. Like, I've jumped off the high dive. My husband thinks I've lost my mind. My kids are like, you're crazy. But I'm in love with Jesus, and that's what I'm doing with everything I have. And so she's in church, and she's texting me about this church service and about this story about this little boy who prayed for his daddy to come home, and the redemption and that had happened, and the music, and the way it all went was incredible. And so she's texting me, and it's, of course, in the middle of church, and I'm like, just call me later. Stop, right? So she calls me later, and I said, so who is this guy? And she says, his name is Jimmie Bratcher. And I dropped the phone. She thought I threw it when I picked it back up, because I asked her, do you know who this man was to me? Do you know who he is? And she said no. And I said, that's my dad. So she understood then why I dropped the phone, and also why she thought I threw the phone. She said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't want to do anything. I wasn't willing to do anything. My heart was still very hard towards him. So
nothing happened.
Nothing happened, and it's now February of 2010, and my husband's father-in-law is in hospice, and he is dying. And as he is walking into the arms of Jesus, I am having this moment with God, and I'm furious because Gene had taken on a lot of daddy roles for me. My grandfather was coming up on 90. He couldn't hear real well, so he never talked on the phone, and I lived far away. So I didn't get to have that relationship. Gene filled those holes for me. He met that need for me, and he was dying. And I said to God, like, what are you doing? What kind of a father are you? Who's going to be my daddy now? Is the prayer. And, well, God had a plan, clearly, because a year, almost to the day later, I got a Facebook friends request from Jimmie Bratcher.
So, of course, I didn't know anything that was going on in 2009. I had no way of knowing that these things were taking place, but they were. And so in February of 2011, Sherry and I were in Christiana, Pennsylvania at Freedom Life Church. They had us there doing a marriage seminar and 3 Sunday morning services. I was getting ready to speak in the last service, and I had spoken 9 times that weekend. And that's way too much talking for me. I don't have that much to say. And
yes, he does.
And when I'm getting ready to walk out, What are you trying to say, Gabby? When I'm getting ready to walk out to do this service, I hear this voice in my heart. And the voice says, I'm about to change your life. And so I started dreaming, what that would look like. Would I quit traveling? Would I get a real job? Would I, what would that mean? I mean, what would those dreams be? And, the thing about God is that we never outdo him in dreaming. A pair of smokers says, I remember it well. She was there that weekend. And, but you can never outdo God in dreams, because the Bible says that he's going to go beyond all that we can ask or think, that he's got a better plan for us than we can even imagine. And so I just put that in my heart. It's like, cool. I mean, I don't know what that means, and maybe I'm anxious about it and everything. So we go to lunch, and we get in a car. People were driving us, and it was really uncomfortable because it was a Honda Element, and we were in the back seat with all our luggage and everything. But on the way to the airport, I get an email from Jessica's mother. And the email says, and by the way, if you get the book, if you've read the book, I just want to point this out while we're here. Sorry, I got to unpack all this stuff we're giving away. To get to a copy of the book, I'm not very organized. But in the book, if you get to the book and you get in the back of the book, there's these gray pages in the back of the book. Look like this. And these pages are the actual emails and texts that we exchanged with each other before we met each other.
And they're only edited for spelling.
Yeah.
They're not.
Yeah.
We didn't change any of the content at all.
Because I'm not a really good speller. But so I got this email from Jessica's mother, and it said, it's overdue that you should meet your daughter and your grandsons. Her name's Jessica. She's on Jessica Strong. She's on Facebook, and she doesn't know about you yet. And so I responded to her mother and just said, when and where? Tell me when and where. I was prepared to go that moment wherever. I didn't know where she was. I think she told me in that email she were in Southern Maryland, and so I didn't know where that was or what to do. But I was ready to go at that moment, whatever that meant. And two, I mean, in forgiveness, especially if you're the offender, you never know how the other person's going to respond. And that's just part of what you have to get over. The fact that I had done this to her, and I needed to step up to the plate and take responsibility for my actions, and to try to do everything that I could to overcome that, to make it right, to have another opportunity, if she was willing. And so I responded and said when and where, and we had a couple of more correspondence, her and I, and she finally said, look, I did my part. It's between you and her. I'm out.
Yeah.
And so Jessica just, she then can tell you what she was going through.
So then I freaked out. Seriously. So I get this friend's request and I freak out. Because at this point, for the last year, I've been learning how to hear the voice of the Lord in my heart, and been hearing, trust me. Every sermon, every devotion, really every time I opened up the word, it was trust me. Do you trust me? Are you willing to trust me? And here's this opportunity for me to trust God. I get this Facebook friends request, and the answer was, whoa, stop. No, really? So God's inviting me to let go of all those things in that box. I talked about that box earlier. All the daddy things are in this box, and God's going, do you trust me with it? And I freaked out. So my mom texts me and says, give me a call. And she says, are you okay? And I said, no, I'm not okay. I don't know what to do. What does he want? Why is he calling me? And if you know me for more than 5 minutes, when I'm upset, I talk at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and I don't kind of make sense. It sort of turns into word vomit. And I'm pretty sure that's what it looked like, because I just, what does he want? Why is he calling me? Why is he bothering me? What am I supposed to do with this? How am I supposed to? I don't even know how to process it. I'm literally hysterical. I showed my husband, actually I skipped that part, didn't I? So back then, Facebook was not on our phones. It was on our laptops, and my husband's watching the Daytona 500. And I handed him the laptop and said, babe, I need you to look at this. And he says, woman, the race is on. Because, you don't interrupt the Daytona 500 for anything. And he said, isn't that your dad? Makes sense. It sort of turns into word vomit. And he said, isn't that your dad?
Sorry. I was trying to set up another screen. I'm sorry. Really, I am.
So welcome to real. This is as real as it gets. This is how we do it.
Yeah, we're real professionals. We put the pro in professional.
So, okay, I don't even know where I was. Where was I?
Daytona.
Okay, so I'm freaking out. And he asked me what I was going to do. And I said, nothing. And I closed the laptop and I got into his truck and I drove to the store, which is about 10 miles away. I had no idea why, what I was getting. I went into the store. I ended up with a truck full of stuff. I don't know what I bought. And in talking to my mom and my sister, they said, you don't have to do anything you don't want to. But I realized shortly after that God had other plans. He was asking me to enter into a trusting relationship with him, to trust him with all these daddy things. But to dad, he got nothing. I didn't answer his friend's request. I didn't send emails, phone calls. I didn't do anything. And I reached out to some trusted friends and said, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, you posted about that today, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. Because I had to wrestle with God, right? I had to give him my calloused heart of stone that I had built brick wall after brick wall after brick wall around, all those daddy things. And he was asking me if I was going to tear that wall down and give him that box. Because what God wants to do, the Bible says, is that he wants to take our heart of stone and exchange it for a heart of flesh. I think that's Ezekiel
36, yeah.
Yeah. And he is putting me in this, not putting me in this place. He's inviting me into this place where I can choose to do that. And up until the day we met, I was still wrestling with whether or not to do it. So people are coming out of the woodwork and they're telling me these horror stories of how they were going to meet their dad and their dad was, he was in prison, or the day after they met, their dad died, or there's just story after story after story about how it went wrong. And, well, I'll tell about the last story.
Okay.
In a minute. But would you tell about what happened to you in those 3 weeks?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I did the same thing. I started reaching out to people, of course, Sherry, and we hadn't told the kids, because our kids, Jason and Amanda, because we didn't know where this was going or if it was going anywhere at that point, because it was up to her. But I have a cousin who found a son, and so I called him and asked him, I called Jim Richards.
Yeah.
Our friend Jim Richards, Dr. Jim Richards, who, if you're not familiar with his ministry and his books, I would encourage you to do that. impactministries.com. And so I reached out to him and I said, what should I do? And he goes, well, if I had a kid out there, I don't want to know about it, you know. Might be dangerous.
I can hear him. I can hear him.
And I called my cousin and I asked him, and I said, what can I do? And he said, well, it's all in their court. It's, you can't ask or demand anything. You can't expect anything. You just have to put it out there, and that's the way it is. And I asked the Lord. I said, Lord, well, I'll tell that in a little bit, but in that period of time between here and there, the realization of what I had done hit my heart. And so I went into this grief that was, it's the deepest regret and hurt that I've ever experienced in my life. And I couldn't believe that I had done something like this to one of my children, but I had, and which meant I had to take responsibility for my actions, and I had to know that forgiveness was real, and that as a believer in Jesus, I needed to this needed to be something that I put all of my heart and soul into to try to make it right. And that's what we're supposed to do, and that's what we did, and it was important to me. And I had a prayer that I would pray, and it was really nothing more than a groan. It was from the deepest part of me. And I'd wake up in the morning and I'd think about her, and I'd just say to God, I'd say, "Oh God, Jessica." And that was all that was coming out of my heart. I couldn't find any other words. I didn't know what to do or anything. And so I waited, and finally I think it was on February 13th, March 13th, sorry.
Yeah.
I sent her an email, and I quoted Ephesians 2:10. Mm-hmm. For we are his workmanship, created for good works in Christ, his masterpiece. And I said, this is you, and I hope to hear from you soon. And she sent me back an email that morning and said, and I told her I was praying for her. And she sent me back an email that morning and said, thank you for praying for me. And those are all in the book. I hope, she said, this is hard for me, and you'll hear from me soon. And so that was that. And
yeah. So I think that was a little bit earlier. Maybe
it was the day.
Maybe it was
the day before the 14th.
I feel like it was longer, but I don't
It
remember
wasn't.
exactly.
Well, it might.
Anyway.
It was the 12th or the 13th, one or the other.
Yeah.
Or maybe the morning of
and
the 14th.
he could not have known that in that time that I was silent to him, what I was processing was that fatherless had become my identity, abandoned, unwanted, unloved. There were so many false beliefs I had about who I was, and all at once those came crashing down because God invited me to have a new identity. And so as he prayed for me and he sent me that scripture, it was like God reaching out and saying, hey, you're not all those things that you thought you were. So on March the 13th, my husband and I were in Virginia Beach for work. And in Virginia Beach.
I don't know.
I don't remember. The dates are all
there.
messed up in my head at the moment because I don't even know what's happening.
I wasn't there.
So Leroy and I are in Virginia Beach. It was the week before. It was a week before. We should probably write these dates down.
They are in the book.
Okay, so we're in Virginia Beach for work, and we're in a hotel overlooking the beach. It's this beautiful scene, and we are writing this email. And in writing this email, I said, I dealt with my emotions about you a long time ago. I knew you were never going to see me dance. You were never going to see me graduate. You were never going to walk me down the aisle. And my mind just went to lunch.
And now that you're here, it's not unwanted
It's
or
not
unwelcome.
unwanted or unwelcome. Oh my gosh, I can't believe
And the little
what's
girl in
happening in my
me.
brain. So the bottom line is that the little girl in me wanted to run to him arms wide open. But the woman in me wanted to know where he'd been and why now. And you showing up is not unwelcome, not unwanted, but it's hard. And thanks for showing up.
And so I was that day at Daytona, of all places, doing concerts at Bike Week, and we were staying with this old biker dude named Drifter. And you can, Drifter, if you're watching, man, Drifter or Roller, love you guys. And that's a great, very fond memory for us staying with Drifter. And but he had no furniture. And so I got that email, and I went back to Drifter's house, and I sat in a lawn chair in the living room. And Drifter's a huge Rolling Stone fan, so it was very appropriate because he had all this Rolling Stones like memorabilia all over the house and no furniture, and it was just perfect. And so I started drafting this email because it was the most important thing that I probably had ever written in my life, and it would make a decision it would help her make a decision that could go either way. And how I responded. And so I just put it all on the table. All of it's in the book. But I wanted to appeal to that little girl. I wanted to talk to her. That's who I wanted to talk to. And she had given me that hope that that little girl was in there and had a desire to run to me with her arms open. And so as I closed my letter, I addressed all of her questions as best I could, and I wanted to appeal to that little girl. And I said, Jessica, I hope that the little girl wins. And that's where the title of our book came from. But I sent that email, and that opened up the floodgates.
Yeah, communicating at that point became a full-time job. It was text and emails, but it was all day, all night.
No no phone conversations.
Right.
And so later that week, we were still on the East Coast. She lives outside of Washington, D.C. And I told her, I said, look, if you would like to meet Sherry and I, if you just name the place, we'll be there. And we were in Augusta, Georgia that Sunday, and she said, how about tomorrow night you come to Charlottesville, Virginia. Leroy's working there, south of their home. And we'll have dinner together. And so we headed up that direction and went to the loudest restaurant in the state of Virginia. Sherry and I were driving the White Pearl. For those of you that remember the White Pearl, we called it a white trash treasure. Oh. You could park it in a Walmart parking lot, and there'd be 100 yards around it because no woman would park next to it.
No.
It was so scary.
No.
And but she picked out a restaurant, and
So I picked out a restaurant looking for, I'm meeting my dad for the first time. You don't want to go to Applebee's for that. So I'm looking.
It depends on if you're a redneck or not.
Well, I am, but not that day.
I like Applebee's, actually. It's, right here in Kansas City, headquarters. Come on, go Applebee's.
Applebee's is fine. It is. So anyway, I'm looking for this restaurant, and I find one that I think will suit our needs. What I don't know is that this is literally the loudest restaurant that I've been in my whole life. We are sitting, the four of us. Well, we'll get to the sitting at the table. But so we're standing in the parking lot behind Leroy's truck, and I am looking to pull out anger and resentment and bitterness. I'm looking for all of the things all the offenses that he has committed, and I want to beat him over the head about it. I'm ready to just let him have it. I think I am. And as I'm searching what I realized is that in my wrestling, I have given God all of those daddy things. And he took it away from me and said, you get to have your daddy instead of all these wounds. And about that time, the White Pearl pulls into the parking lot, and I realize that they really are hippies. It's the biggest hippie van I've ever seen in my life. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess hippies is what we're doing. So you guys pulled around, and you see us standing there.
Right. And I had made up my mind, since I hadn't heard her voice, that I was not going to speak until she said something. And I tell people that, I don't use hi or hello in a greeting because I'm too cool for that. I'll do something like, hey, what's up, or something, but so I was anxious. And those of you that are parents, you understand that, how important those first words that you hear from your children are. And so we got out of the van, and I saw Leroy standing there. Leroy, if you're still on. And so we got to tell you about Leroy. Leroy is First Sergeant, retired Marine Corps drill instructor of the year. And I look at Leroy and I'm like, yeah, this dude's packing, or he going to rip my throat out, one or the other, And but Leroy was cool, and so I walk up to her, and I'm just standing there, and I'm waiting for her to say something, and finally she looks at me and she goes,
hey, I'm a hugger.
And she threw her arms around me, and we stood there in that parking lot, and we wept for probably at least 10 minutes or longer, just in each other's arms. And there was tears flowing, but there was healing happening.
Yeah.
And there was restoration happening.
Yeah.
And it was nobody had said, I had asked her in emails, I said, and I think the first email that I sent, or the first email response to you, I had said, sometime I want to ask that you do that. But I hadn't done that yet at that point. And so we went into the restaurant. And Sherry, by the way, she had an event scheduled that she had to be at tonight, or she would be here and be online. And Shelley Leatherman says, I'm not crying. Are you crying? I said, I'm almost crying, but not quite. It's fighting coming. It back tonight.
It's coming. He's going to cry.
I'm fighting it back tonight.
So we're standing out there, and we're hugging. And at some point, I don't know if it was Mom or if it was Leroy.
It was Mom.
But one of them says, hey, we have reservations. Why don't we go inside? And so we walk into this restaurant, and it's so loud in there that the four of us can't hear the other half of the table. So Dad and I are sitting on one side, and Mom and Leroy are sitting on the other side, and we can't hear each other's conversations because it's so loud.
Yeah, but before we got there, we were driving up from Augusta, Georgia that day,
right. Yeah.
and Sherry and I were talking, and I said, so Sherry, what do you think? Where are you at in this? And she said, Jimmie, she says, we have a great marriage, and we have a great family. We have a great life, but something's always been missing. And Jessica and Leroy and the boys are it.
Yeah.
Okay, Shelley, now I'm crying. And so we had this expectation, we knew. Actually, I posted about it, I think. It's in the book. In the first email, I mentioned to Jessica that I had written this song on my new album that came out in 2010 called It's a New Day. It's the opening track on my Exchange album, and it's a weird song in that it's about the hope of forgiveness. It's about the hope of being forgiven. And there's a lyric video out there on it, and the lyric video runs in reverse. So all the images are like taken back things. And but I thought this song was really bizarre because it was not about being forgiven. It was about the hope of being forgiven. And I didn't know what was going on in the spirit or with her or any of these things, but somewhere in my heart there was this reality that I needed to have hope of being forgiven. And so many people that we've talked to that have had these similar stories seem to think, hey, there's no hope in this situation. There's no way this is going to happen. And we're telling the story just because we want people to have that hope and to
Absolutely.
experience that kind of encouragement. I couldn't demand it. I couldn't command it. I couldn't say, hey man, I'm your dad, you gotta, and no, I couldn't do any of those things. And while I was on the way up there, I was just, so broken and just so, I don't know what the right word is. I was just so, open-hearted and willing and listening and desperate, I guess, is the right answer. And I told the Lord, I said, I don't know what to do. And his response was something that only he would come up with. He just said to me, Jimmie, you love her. And I'm like, okay, I know how to do that. I can do that. I don't have to pretend. I don't have to make something up. I don't have to act. I can be myself, and I can open up my heart to her and give her me and love her. And so we're sitting in that restaurant, and Sherry had brought her a gift, and Leroy a gift.
Yeah.
And I meant to have one of those here tonight, but I didn't. And it was a keychain. And Jason, so Sherry gave her this keychain, and it was very important to her. It had different hippie items on it. It had a peace sign, a guitar pick, and a little heart, and a whole bunch of other things. And so she was so moved by it that she got one for all the kids. And so Jason came to me and he goes, this thing's kind of girly. Can we just get tattoos? So we designed a tattoo that's the family crest that had all of these items on it, and he and I went and got tattoos that marked that moment.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we're sitting there at the table, and Leroy goes, and I'm sorry, we're getting a little long. We'll try to kind of wrap things down, but
well, so there's something that I want to talk about before we get to the question that you asked.
Okay.
So leading up to this point, he's got this hope for forgiveness. He's desperate for forgiveness. What I can look back now and see is that my willingness with the Lord was preparing me to receive my forgiveness this way, because I wouldn't have been ready to receive you,
right,
if I wasn't prepared for that. And so I had to be able to do the work with Jesus in my heart that allowed me to receive forgiveness for myself before I could extend it to you.
Right.
And so we both came in with these hearts that were willing and open and teachable and ready for the beautiful thing that God was about to do. So you reached across the table.
And I grabbed her by the arm and I said, I'm not going to demand anything, but sometime would you please forgive me for what I've done?
And I could honestly say in that very moment that I said, we can't change the past, but you're here now and we're cool.
And so we started from that moment. We left there, went back to the hotel, and sat in the lobby for several hours, and we visited. Sorry, there's a watermark up on the screen. My setup here I'm having technical issues, and this is the only way that I could get it to work, so you just have to bear with us on that. But So we started, and there's so much more to the story, but we've been on here for about an hour, and I just wanted, there's so many more details, like why are we giving away a zero candy bar?
Yeah.
It's because zeros are my favorite candy bar.
And they're my favorite candy
And
bar.
we didn't know that that was genetic, that it got passed to her. And it was part of a gift that she gave me. It's right over here on the shelf.
You want it?
Yeah, grab it. And the first time that we went to church together, she gave me this coffee mug that was full of zero candy bars, just like the ones that are in the box. And it's got daddy names all over it. And she gave me this, and she grabbed me by the face, and she said, Daddy.
I'll say it.
Okay.
Daddy, it's like you were always here.
And that's the way our relationship is. So we were able to allow the Lord to help us overcome all the hurts and all the pains. And for me, I thought that the blessings of God, I qualified for the blessings of God on my life the day I received Him forward. And I didn't realize that He, not being bound by time, would look back into my past to a time when I didn't know Him or serve Him. And He would reach back there and say, you know what? I can redeem this. And I'm going to, because that's who I am. And He did that.
I
for
didn't
us.
know that He could reach back into my life from the very beginning and wipe away the lies that I was believing about who I am in Him and who I am to you.
And some of the other miracles are that all of our families were 100% in. Leroy has 2 boys, and they're, grown.
Yep.
By that time,
By that time, they were
pretty
grown.
much
Yeah, Seth
in
had
their
already
20s.
graduated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they call us Grammy and Pops, and then Aaron, which is Jessica's oldest, he was all in. And my first sight of him was on stage playing guitar in the youth group at church.
That'll make you cry. Made him cry.
Yep. Shut up. I'm not crying. I'm not crying. And so anyway, so there's so much more. We could stay on here for hours, but we wanted to make sure and give you time to ask questions. So if you got questions, all you have to do is post them. Hey, Randy Craig.
Hey, Randy Craig.
Love you. One of my best friends in the world forever. And I was thinking about you the other day, thinking about riding in the back of your 46 Chevy playing Hank Williams songs in the back seat. So, but anyway, so if you have any questions about us or about the story, or that you want to ask us what it's like now, I think you can pretty well see that by how we treat each other. Just give us some questions, and I think we got all the feeds up here, and we can answer them if you'd like, and then we're gonna pick out a winner. We're gonna let Miss Mary pick out a winner. She doesn't have all the feeds though.
No, they're not.
So they're not what?
All coming through.
Yeah, you just have the my Facebook page and YouTube.
So the
And-
first question you have over here is, will Jessica be with you on Sunday?
No, she won't.
Sorry to say that I will not be. We'll be back in Maryland.
We shared our story there last year
We did.
on Mother's Day, I think it was.
We did.
It was on Mother's Day last year, and we will be in Chillicothe at the Women's Correctional Facility, Chillicothe, Missouri,
This Mother's Day.
on May 12th, which is the day before Mother's
Yeah,
Day
of course.
again.
Yeah.
Stephen King, love you too, man.
Love you, Dave. Thanks for jumping on, man.
Thank you, Jerry Coulter, for saying that. We're brave. Well, did I know about Jessica before the call? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I did, John. I'm sorry. There's Joy Shaver. Joy, love you.
Love you,
Miss you
Joy.
guys. Oh, I didn't realize this said 30 minutes. Well, we're back. I don't know where we're back at, but I guess we're back up here.
Yeah.
So I think we're all there. Okay.
advice?
So I'm looking for...
Is there another songwriter in Jessica's son? Both of my biological children
our musical.
are musical. The older of the two dabbled in poetry for a while and songwriting. And the younger one, I think the creativity was there. He used to write books when he was little. So potentially, yeah.
So Howard Lowell asked the question, are things still unfolding? Love you sharing.
So I think the initial healing was intense and very full, but things came up as we went along that still required us to have conversations. Like you carried regret and guilt.
I did.
And so we
Beat it out of me.
attacked him like a pack of wild animals.
Yeah.
Because that's not how I'm going to live my life, and I don't want him to live his life that way either. If I've forgiven him, he should not allow himself to wander around in that
And I think
space.
that, my heart was prepared for being forgiven and not allowing myself to do that. But I mean, when the kids, Jason was here and Jason asked me, he said, so you have guilt and shame about this? And I said, no, I'm not going to, I know how destructive that is. I'm not going to live my life that way. But I said, you just have to give me regret. And I understand that, that I am regretful, but at the same time, I can't hang on to that negative emotion and live my life that way, because it's not fair to her and it's not fair to my wife and to my family if I do that.
That's right.
And so we've pushed all that stuff out of there.
Check on Tim Zier's question.
I saw Tim. So any advice for a dad who knows where his daughter is, but she won't have anything to do with him? And the answer is yes. My first advice would be hear the voice of God on what to do and how to respond.
And my advice to you also is she's driving the bus. You can't make her do something she's not ready to do
Right.
or not willing to do.
Yep. And Charles Cash said he's heard her story multiple times on video and in person. It never gets old. Thank you, Charles. He's lost 70 pounds in the last year.
I saw.
That. He's like skinny.
And my writer friend, Charles, love reading your work.
Yeah. Stephen King says we need a technical call to review the tools and have lessons learned. Well,
Yes.
I have been, I had to upgrade my computer operating system because it was so old. When I did, then everything went south, and I've tried to make that work, and it hasn't. So anyway, so I'm looking over here at this other
You don't have any
feed.
feeds over there anymore at all.
I do.
Okay.
I got one back.
Okay.
Okay.
Phil was asking, have you had any disagreements since you connected? If so, how did you deal with that? Or you feel fearful of breaking what you had worked so hard to mend?
I can say I was never.
Now, let
I
me
was
read
never-
that so everybody can hear it on
Oh,
here.
okay.
So Phil Vandal said, have you had any disagreements since you connected? If so, how did you deal with that? Were you fearful of breaking what you had worked so hard to mend? I'm sure we have had some disagreements.
One stands out in particular. So when we've told the story, sometimes we talk about in my life at that time, Leroy and I were struggling. The kids were struggling. There was a lot of stuff that was not going real well in our lives. And when they came into our lives, it was like, oh, healthy counselor people, like you should counsel us. And so there was a conversation where they sat us down. We're like, we're not your counselors. And it was a truth and love moment where we needed to be redirected to marriage counseling, individual counseling, or whatever. And it was pretty direct, but very kind and loving and very welcomed. And we both received it really well.
Some of my friends told me to expect that, and I didn't receive that. They told me that would be expected. I could expect it to happen, that her emotions would change or whatever, and I just didn't have any kind of belief that would take place. And Sherry and I have been very sensitive to continue. You know, we work hard at our relationship, let's put it that way. And Jessica works hard at keeping and maintaining our relationship. We talk, I don't know, a number of times a week.
Yeah.
We either talk on the phone or FaceTime. And
a lot of texting.
A lot of texting back and forth. And it's not just us initiating that, it's her initiating, we initiate. You know, if we go 2 or 3 days without communicating, where, you know, somebody's picking up the phone and saying what's going on or something. And we know, you know, we're busy, we travel, but, you know, even if it's just like, hey, how's my girl? Or, you know, hey, I'm thinking about you, and just throwing that out there just to keep those things in your heart. You know, I think that makes a big difference. So
I think one of the things that I learned was that they always answered the phone for me. So especially in the early days of the relationship, unless Dad was on a stage or actively speaking, he answered the phone. He answered the text.
And I do that with all my kids.
And
I pretty much do that with everybody.
Yeah. But it set an example that I mattered enough that you were gonna be available to me.
Well, I remember one instance where you were at home and you had been someplace and you were away from home and you were driving back home and it was late.
Yeah.
And Mom said, "You text me when you get back home." And your response was very stern, and you said, "Now, why would I do that? Why would you want me to do that?"
Yep.
And Sherry said, "Well, so we know that you got home safe, and so we know that you're okay." And you were like, that was completely foreign to you.
So it was an opportunity for me to for me to experience something different.
Right.
Yeah. And so I never had a fear of the relationship changing. I never had any fear of losing the relationship.
Right.
I have always been, they have always helped me feel secure and confident that I'm their girl and I will always be their girl. I'm not their only girl. Mm-mm. And there was never any of that either, right?
No, I mean, there's definite sibling rivalry. Jason was we went to Jason's restaurant today, and he was really nice. He didn't call you names or nothing.
He didn't call me names. I have a name in his phone, and we're not talking about that.
Why not? But, so we hadn't had any of that. Dave Wilcox said, my pastor said to me, "Jesus has forgiven you, now you need to forgive you."
You know what, Dave? That's one of the hardest things for a lot of us, is it is easier for me to forgive him something than it is for me to forgive myself for something I've done.
Yeah. We have a friend, a mutual friend now, Jessica knows, we introduced him to him, Bob and Audrey Meisner, and their story is amazing and just, not good. It's amazing what happened through the forgiveness that was extended. But Audrey, they were both ministry people, and Audrey had a one-time sexual affair. And, the end of the story is she became pregnant from that. And Bob had a choice to make. What was it going to be? Who's going to cover her? The Lord asked him that question, and he said, "I will." And when the baby was born, he gave the baby his name. And when I first met Audrey, she taught me about forgiveness by her actions, because I expected her to be very remorseful and very just solemn and sober and wounded and shamed and all of those things. And she would, if you ever know her, she didn't any of that stuff.
There's none of that in her.
There's none of that. And I was like, my religious, attitude was like, well, what's wrong with her? It's like, she doesn't act like she did these things. She acted like she was forgiven. And that taught me when this was going on, because we met before this all happened, but it taught me that I can actually release all those things. I can, she said it was okay. Jesus said it was okay. Sherry said it was okay. My kids said it was okay.
Everybody said it was okay.
I have to say it's okay and just say, all I can do is be who Jesus made me to be, and that's it.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else that's got any stories or got any questions, not stories? When will we be back? Oh, so Kathy asks, I love your story. God's timing is perfect. When will you be back in Augusta, Georgia? I don't know. That would be up to the church there where we were.
You know about Clint?
No, it was Hamilton's church.
Oh, okay.
In Augusta, Georgia. So I don't know. Don't know that answer to that one. So that's up to the church. So anybody else got any questions they'd like to ask?
Rick Coleman wants to know the best trip you ever took in the White Pearl.
Well, it was actually the most legendary trip was the trip back from meeting her, because we started from Maryland, the East Coast, coming back across the United States, Sherry and I, full of equipment. And by the time we got to Indiana, the White Pearl just kept slowing down. By the time we got to St. Louis, all the faster it would go would be 45. So just like pedal to the metal, 45. And so we were, barely getting up the hills, and then we'd get it going as fast as we could down the hills. And we got home, and I went to get it fixed at the Dodge dealer, and they go, well, the catalytic converter's clogged, and it's $1,200. And I'm like, man, a White Pearl ain't worth $1,200. The tires cost more than the van is worth. But my next door neighbor then at the time, he said, no, take it over the hill to Riverside, Missouri to Ray's muffler. And if you take Ray a plate of food, it'll be cheaper. And so I did. And Ray, he called me and he said, okay, your catalytic converter's clogged. It'll be $300 cash money. And so he didn't want a credit card. He didn't want anything but a check. He wanted cash money. And so anyway, so that was probably the most legendary of trips. We took a lot of them though. We did so many trips to Sturgis in that thing. We drove it to Daytona on that trip. We drove it to Daytona, and it was good. So what Rick says, so what you're saying is it served your purpose. It was a huge blessing. It was tremendous. One of my friends here in town, Pastor Dennis Slavens, came to me shortly after that, in 2016, I think it was, and he goes, Jimmy, you can't drive the White Pearl anymore. It's embarrassing to the ministry. And I said, well, it's serving its purpose, Rick. And he said, you got to get rid of that thing, and I'm going to help you raise the money to do it. And so he helped us raise the money, and that's what got us what we now drive, called the Big Pearl. And so anyway, all right, well, we're going to get off of here, and I so appreciate you all being on and coming along with us on this journey. We will go back through the comments and pick out a winner and contact you and send you the giveaway. So God bless you all. We love you. We'll see you later.